I think the problem in Philly was Carson Wentz. That guy could not get anything going. He could not bring any life to that team. And that's just the way it works sometimes. I mean, I guess things weren't clicking, him and Doug Peterson. But I was just looking at this game. We're looking at the rest of the NFC East, and you could think they could be the laughing stock of the league to being really freaking good next year, because you look at Washington, they're one quarterback away from being I wouldn't say a contender, but a playoff team. I wouldn't say a Super Bowl contender, but they could be a threat in the NFC with that,
sure.
with Chase Young leading that defense. Dak Prescott coming back next year. I think the Cowboys can be good. I mean, Graham was completely wrong about that this year, but you never know. You still have a whole offseason to get better and improve. I mean, the Giants, I feel like the Giants could be the worst team in the NFC East next year, just because I don't trust Daniel Jones at all. Like
I kind of like what they have going for them on defense, though. I feel like their defense is pretty
but
stingy.
you can't
They need to get an offensive line. Right.
You win football games if Daniel Jones is fumbling. What, I think like 5 times he fumbled. No,
pretty
3
sure
times.
he's led the league in turnover. Oh, he's like top 4 in turnover since last year.
You can't fumble the ball 3 times and get sacked 6 times.
Right.
And win a football game. That doesn't work. But don't sleep on the NFC East next year.
Yeah,
especially if Jalen Hurts plays this way.
And you're right. Like, if you really look at it, like we were just saying, like, I mean, even Giants getting Barkley back, you presume they're going to add probably another offensive piece. And if they don't make the playoffs, they'll get a lottery pick. So I mean, and they're one of the worst teams in the NFC overall, because the NFC East is so bad. Even though they're in the playoff hunt, I mean, if they lose out, they're going to get a top 10 pick. So
right.
you add another piece, maybe. I don't know who in terms of offense is available or who's going to go where, but I mean, if they can add another piece on defense or offense to the draft and then do the same in free agency, I mean, and then you got a healthy Dak, like you said. The one I wanted to focus on was that the Eagles now, you run with Hurts for the rest of the season. I think that's like pretty much guaranteed. I don't think they're going to switch back to Wentz unless an injury happens. But I think next season's a big question mark. I personally think they just go back with Wentz, and that's the route they have to go. It's not that they want to do that, but they're forced to, because that contract they're paying him upwards of $40 million next year, which when it kicks in, I don't think you can have that backing up a team, and you're not going to be able to move him. I think there's a situation in like 2 years where they can cut him and like save a little bit of money, and it won't be too detrimental to them. But for now, I think there's no other way for them to maneuver around this. You can't sit Wentz and pay him $40 million to be the backup. Even no matter what Hurts does in this final stretch, I really don't think you can sit Wentz, because he's shown before, even in the season after he got injured, or even last season, I should say, he didn't play that bad. He threw under 10 picks. I think he threw 25-ish touchdowns. It wasn't that bad.
He made some good throws too. I was watching some highlights the other day, and I don't think it's a Wentz problem. I think it's a Wentz in Philadelphia problem.
Yeah, I can see that, and that's why I jokingly, we were talking about when I was about to write an article about, maybe Wentz to the Patriots. I wasn't aware of how big his contract was. But if this guy was getting paid $15-20 million, you're talking about a replacement for Newton. I mean, he's a young guy who was an MVP candidate early on in his career, and that wouldn't be a bad move, especially if Hurts balls out. Of course, now it's like, are you going to pay $35 million to him and not to Brady? And that brings up some question marks. But I mean, I think he can be talented somewhere else. It's just a matter of whether they can move him or not. And if they can't, I don't think they have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree. I feel like the Eagles just. The thing that pissed me off about the Eagles is, as a Pats fan, the fact that we lost them in the Super Bowl, and that was so clearly a fluke. Looking at them now, but in terms of Wentz, I'm wondering, like, I'm curious as to whether or not they could trade him, because I mean, obviously Hurts has. It's too early to make any judgments right now, but Hurts has looked pretty good. He hasn't been anything like Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, but granted, I mean, he's on the Eagles, so it's hard to kind of tell. But he has looked pretty good, and it's like, will you trade Wentz? Will anybody take him with that contract? Will you have to eat a large portion of it in order to get rid of him? Because clearly, the Wentz experiment, I guess, really just isn't working in Philadelphia. I actually heard about an article the other day, or maybe last week, that was talking about Carson Wentz, and his confidence in Philadelphia is just completely shot because they drafted Hurts. The media is going after him like crazy. I think you really just the city's kind of given up on him. And Philadelphia, as we all know, is a pretty brutal sports city, probably worse in the country.
Yeah.
It's probably the worst place you can kind of underperform like that and everything. So, despite how often they underperform, it's a pretty bad place to do it. So, I don't know. I think you got to go with Hurts, but
Next season,
I feel for Wentz there for sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, before you go, Anthony, like, that's another thing. You don't want Wentz coming here because the fact that, like I saw that same report, Pat, if that's the case, for one, he's not a franchise quarterback because franchise quarterbacks don't crush under pressure from the media of strong media cities. I mean, if you're a franchise quarterback, like, you name some of the big ones like Big Ben or Aaron Rodgers, you can play anywhere. It's not like you only have to play in a small market. So that's the case. That's a big hit on Wentz. And two, like you said, I don't know how easy it is to eat money in the NFL. I know it is like the NBA. You can structure shit.
I was not sure about that either.
But if that's the case, I mean, they're gonna. I'm thinking they got to eat at least $20 million of that contract next year. Get it down to $15 million because that's a huge leap for a lot of teams, especially if that team is in a bigger market where, Wentz is still gonna have that same pressure. And I don't know. I mean, if that report's true, I don't want him on the Patriots, and I don't think anyone should because New England's arguably the second biggest market behind Philadelphia in terms of like criticism and maybe he's even in front of Philadelphia. So I don't know, but I think I don't know how Anthony feels about it, but Hurts for the rest of the season and then see where it goes in the offseason.
Yeah, I agree with you guys there just because of the fact that I don't know, like I don't know what's Washington right now, 6-7, 5-7,
6-7, I believe.
I think it's going to be really tough for a team like
6-7.
The Eagles to get into the playoffs, just because I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like off the top of my head. But
the other teams would have to lose out, I think, probably.
Yeah,
they need some help.
If you're going to need that help, why would you rely on that? Why not? Hey, throw the kid in. Might as well. Let's see what he can do in the last. Maybe he does get us to the playoffs. Maybe we do get the help without realizing it, and he gets us to the playoffs. I mean, that's just luck at that point. But if he's playing well, then hell, I don't know what to do. Like, that's a really tough predicament that Philly's in right now.
Well, and the one thing that people need to keep in mind is like we've seen how Hurts is a run first QB. Obviously, he's almost ran as many yards as he passed for. He's not a Mahomes. He's not someone who can run but will pass beforehand. If you look at who we've seen make it to the playoffs in recent years, Lamar Jackson's the first name that comes to mind. And we saw what he did in the regular season and then saw what happened in the postseason. I wonder if it's easier now to game plan against these running quarterbacks because that's kind of what the NFL is adapting into. So I think people need to slow it down as in, when they're talking about Hurts being this next guy in Philly and he's going to be, he's got that Lamar Jackson kind of movement and he's a running back type of quarterback. I mean, that hasn't worked yet. We haven't really seen that work. Maybe this year if Lamar can make it to the Super Bowl, we can be like, all right, well, that game plan works. But I don't know. I think the Eagles would certainly like to see Wentz bounce back next season because I think he's more of a pass first mobile QB, which is what you mostly see get to the Super Bowl. Like guys like Jimmy G and Patrick Mahomes last year, both of them can run, but they're pass first. And not only does run first come with injury, but it's just a lot easier to throw a spy up, rush for and contain. And if they can't throw the ball down the field, you're going to win games. That's what's happened to the Ravens this year. It's what happened in the past. So I don't know.
You have to be able to only do damage with your legs kind of as a last resort. Like if people are expecting you to run, it can't work as much. But if you can throw a run in there when they defend well against the pass, then that makes you that much more valuable.
And just looking at like who you look at this past Super Bowl winners, you've had mobile quarterbacks in the league since, Mike Vick. I mean, you see success in the regular season. Do you see it in the postseason? Not as much. And it's probably because teams have a lot of film to look for. They know exactly what they're facing for, at least a couple weeks maybe. So it's like, you've got guys like Russell Wilson who can run, like we said, but they can throw the ball. And guys like Lamar and Hurts scare you a bit when it comes to like what you've seen in the past.